April 1943. The Solomon Sea shimmered under the morning sun as a formation of American B-25 Mitchell bombers climbed through scattered clouds. Their olive-drab fuselages bore the faded white star of the U.S. Army Air Forces, engines droning in synchronized rhythm. Inside the cramped cockpit of one of those bombers, Captain Frank Miller tightened his oxygen mask and checked his altimeter. 10,000 feet. Below them stretched an endless expanse of ocean, blue and indifferent. Ahead lay Bougainville, a heavily defended Japanese stronghold. Their mission? Strike a supply depot on the coast and return before the Zero patrols could intercept. But the enemy had already been warned. For months, Japanese pilots had mocked the B-25 as a slow, lumbering target. They called it the flying coffin, a bomber too heavy to maneuver and too lightly armed to defend itself. Compared to the sleek Mitsubishi A6M0, the Mitchell was a farm truck with wings. Every Japanese ace knew that if a Zero found a B-25 alone, the outcome was never in doubt. But what the Japanese didn't yet understand was that American crews were learning fast, learning to fight dirty, low, and hard. Captain Miller's crew had been flying together for 6 months out of Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. They were veterans of constant raids and sleepless nights, patched-up planes, and jungle heat. Their B-25 serial number 41-30445 was nicknamed Ruthless Ruth after Miller's fiancée back home in Kansas. The nose art, painted by the tail gunner, showed a pin-up girl leaning on twin 50 caliber machine guns. The irony wasn't lost on the crew. Those same weak guns were their only chance against Zeros that could climb faster, turn tighter, and dive harder. At 8:42 hours, Miller's formation broke through a thin layer of clouds and began its attack run. Japanese anti-aircraft batteries opened fire immediately, black puffs bursting around the bombers. Miller's co-pilot, Lieutenant Jack Sutter, called out targets as the bombardier released the payload. 6 500-pound general-purpose bombs tumbling toward a line of fuel drums near the airfield. Direct hits. A column of fire erupted, lighting the coastline. But the celebration lasted seconds. Over the radio came the warning everyone dreaded. Zeros inbound, 6 bogeys, high at 2 o'clock. The formation split instinctively, throttles pushed forward, turrets swinging. The Zeros dove out of the sun, cannon flashes sparkling like angry fireflies. The first pass shredded the tail of Ruthless Ruth's wingman, sending it spiraling into the jungle below. Miller banked hard left, the bomber groaning under the strain. "Top turret, fire! Fire!" he shouted. Sergeant Joe Kramer squeezed the twin Brownings, tracers arcing upward in glowing chains. A Zero flashed past the cockpit, close enough for Miller to see the red circle on its fuselage. He knew the odds. The B-25 wasn't built to fight fighters. It was built to bomb ships and airfields. But Miller had one advantage the Japanese never expected: stubbornness. He throttled down, dropped to 9,500 feet, and swung around for open sky. The crew could hear bullets punching through the fuselage. Sparks showered from the radio panel. Then came the shout from the tail. "Zero on R6! He's coming in fast!" The Japanese pilot, Lieutenant Kiyoshi Tanaka, was one of Rabal's top aces with 18 kills to his name. He lined up the American bomber easily. Big, slow, predictable. His wingman stayed high, covering the attack. Tanaka closed the distance, cannon armed. But as he pressed the trigger, the B-25 did something unexpected. It rolled. Not much, just enough to throw off his aim. Tanaka blinked in disbelief. No bomber should be able to roll like that. Then the tail gunner opened up, twin streams of 50 caliber fire streaking through the air. Tanaka's Zero shuddered, smoke trailing from its engine. He pulled up, still confident. After all, a B-25 couldn't possibly win. What he didn't know was that Captain Miller was just getting started. Lieutenant Kiyoshi Tanaka's Zero banked sharply, black smoke curling from its cowl. But the veteran pilot wasn't done yet. He leveled out above the bomber, disappearing into the clouds for a moment. Below, Captain Miller's crew reloaded, their ears ringing from the roar of the Brownings. Inside Ruthless Ruth, the air smelled of oil, gunpowder, and sweat. Oxygen masks hissed softly as the crew braced for the next attack. "Coming back around! 3 o'clock high!" shouted Kramer from the top turret. The faint shimmer of sunlight caught the Zero's wings as it dived again. Miller's pulse pounded. "Hold steady," he barked. The bomber's nose dipped slightly, allowing the forward gunner to get a clear line of fire. Private First Class Eddie Nolan gripped the twin .50s, tracking the silver streak descending like a hawk. The moment the Zero filled his sights, he squeezed the triggers. The entire nose of the B-25 vibrated with the fury of gunfire. The tracers stitched across the sky, one catching the Zero's wingtip. But Tanaka stayed on course, undeterred, his 20mm cannons spitting fire. Shells ripped through the bomber's right wing, tearing fabric and aluminum. The aircraft shook violently. One of the hydraulic lines burst, spraying red fluid across the cockpit. Sutter cursed as the controls stiffened. Miller gritted his teeth, forcing the yoke with both hands. "Hydraulics are gone," Sutter yelled. "We can't bank right." "Then we bank left," Miller snapped. "He wants us to panic." We don't. Tanaka's next burst struck the fuselage near the waist position, grazing the radio operator. Sergeant Tom Briggs slumped forward, clutching his shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve. But even as the medic crawled to help, Briggs shouted through clenched teeth, "Keep firing, damn it!" The formation was gone now, each bomber fighting for its life. Above the chaos, the sky became a deadly ballet of spinning trails and burning wrecks. Ruthless Ruth dove to 8,000 feet, using her weight to gain speed. Miller knew he couldn't outrun a Zero, but he could make it harder for Tanaka to get a clean shot. He weaved the plane in long, lazy S-turns, small movements, unpredictable rhythm. The Japanese ace studied his prey carefully. "Clumsy, but clever," he muttered in his cockpit. He admired courage, even in enemies, but pride burned deeper. He pushed his throttle forward, engine screaming as he dove again. This time he'd finish it. "6 o'clock low," Kramer shouted. Miller yanked the bomber into a shallow climb. The Zero rose behind them, closing fast. "Tail!" "Let him have it!" Corporal Sam Yates in the tail turret had been waiting for this. He'd been quiet since takeoff, chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him sane. Now he lined up the Zero perfectly. The spinning prop, the rising nose, the flash of the rising sun emblem. It was all clear in his sight. He squeezed both triggers. The guns thundered, brass casings bouncing across the floor. Tracers curved upward, converging perfectly on the Zero's path. Tanaka tried to roll away, but one bullet found the mark. It punched through the engine cowling, shattering the oil pump. Smoke gushed out instantly. The Zero faltered, sputtered, then steadied again. Somehow it kept flying. "He's not going down," Yates yelled. "He will," Miller muttered, eyes locked ahead. "He just doesn't know it yet." For a few tense seconds, the two aircraft circled like predators. Each man knew the next move could mean death. Miller's bomber was damaged, sluggish, losing altitude, but still alive. Tanaka's Zero was fast, but its engine was coughing smoke. They were opposites, locked in a duel that defied reason. Then the radio crackled. "Ruthless Ruth, this is Falcon 2. We're inbound. 2 P-38s closing from north. Hang on." Miller's heart leapt. Backup was coming. But Tanaka wasn't about to let his kill slip away. He pushed his throttle full forward, diving straight for the B-25 one last time, determined to end it before help arrived. "Brace for impact," Miller shouted. The crew gripped their stations as the Zero hurtled toward them, sunlight flashing off its wings. The next few seconds would decide who lived and who fell into the sea below. The Zero came in like a silver bullet, slicing through the clouds with terrifying precision. Tanaka could feel the stick trembling under his grip, the engine straining as smoke trailed behind him. He didn't care. He was a samurai in the sky, and honor demanded the kill. His guns were hot, his eyes locked on the wounded American bomber below. The B-25 loomed larger with every heartbeat. Inside Ruthless Ruth, Captain Miller shouted over the roar of the engines. "Tail, light him up!" "Already on it," Yates barked, his voice steady despite the shaking. He tracked the approaching Zero through his gun sight, waiting for that perfect angle. Every second felt like an eternity. The Japanese fighter was closing fast, too fast. "Eddie, give him some nose fire," Miller yelled. From the front, Nolan swung the nose turret and opened up, firing short, controlled bursts. The .50 caliber tracers streaked across the sky, forcing Tanaka to bank slightly. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough to throw off his aim. His first burst ripped through the B-25's tail fin, but missed the vital control cables by inches. The bomber shook violently, alarms buzzing across the cockpit. Sutter fought to keep the wings level. "She's losing trim." "Keep her steady," Miller growled. "We're not done yet." Tanaka lined up again, eyes narrowing. He was close enough now to see the crew through the windows, the flash of movement, the glint of gun barrels. He pressed the trigger. A cannon shell smashed through the B-25's right engine. Flames burst out instantly, licking along the cowling. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. "Right engine's gone," Sutter shouted. "We're flying on one." "Feather the prop." "Don't let it drag," Miller barked, his voice calm, deliberate. Even now under fire, he refused to let panic win. He knew if they broke formation, they were dead. But Tanaka wasn't the only predator in the sky. Above the chaos, two distant shapes closed in fast, twin-boomed, sleek, and menacing. The P-38 Lightnings, American escort fighters, roaring in from the north. "Falcon 2 to Ruthless Ruth. We've got eyes on your tail," the radio cracked. "Hang tight. We're on him." Miller exhaled sharply. "About damn time," he muttered. Tanaka saw them too, two silver arrows cutting through the clouds. He cursed under his breath. But he wasn't retreating. Not yet. He'd come this far, and pride demanded a final strike. He turned sharply, climbing into the sun, preparing to dive again. Below, the B-25 trailed black smoke. The crew worked frantically to contain the fire. Yates had dumped the extinguisher, and the flames were dying down, but the right wing still glowed faintly. "We can't take another hit," Sutter warned. Miller's jaw clenched. "We won't have to." Tanaka's Zero burst from the clouds, diving straight toward them again, sunlight flaring off his canopy. But this time Miller was ready. He slammed the throttle forward, pulling the B-25 into a shallow climb. The big bomber groaned, shuddering under the strain, but held together. "Front turret, fire!" Miller shouted. Nolan opened up with everything he had. Tracers streamed toward the diving Zero. Tanaka twisted his controls, rolling left, dodging by inches. He fired again. Cannon shells raked the B-25's fuselage. One shell exploded near the waist gunner's station, filling the cabin with smoke and shrapnel. Briggs was hit again, this time in the leg, but he didn't cry out. "Still in the fight," he gasped. His blood stained the floor, but his hands never left the radio. The P-38s were almost there now, diving at full speed. "Falcon 2 taking the Zero," one of them called. The Lightning's guns blazed, 6.50 cals ripping through the air. Tracers streaked past Ruthless Ruth and connected with the Zero's left wing. Tanaka jerked the stick, pulling up sharply. The wing tore away in a burst of debris. The fighter spun wildly, trailing smoke and fire. The American crew watched in silence as the Zero spiraled downward, vanishing into the clouds below. But Miller didn't celebrate. He kept his eyes ahead, breathing hard. "We're not out yet," he muttered. "We still have to make it home." The ocean stretched endlessly beneath them. One engine gone, hydraulic lines shot, fuel leaking. But somehow Ruthless Ruth was still flying. The sea below shimmered like glass, hiding death beneath its calm surface. Ruthless Ruth limped southward, smoke trailing behind her like a wounded beast. One engine dead, hydraulics shot, and half her controls sluggish. Yet she was still in the air. For Captain Frank Miller and his crew, survival had become a minute-by-minute gamble. "Fuel pressure's dropping," Sutter warned, his voice hoarse. "We're leaking fast." Miller checked the gauges. Half their reserves were gone. They wouldn't make it back to Guadalcanal without luck or a miracle. "Feather the right prop again," he ordered. "We'll milk the left until she gives out." In the radio compartment, Sergeant Briggs was pale but conscious. His leg was bleeding through the bandage, but his hands still hovered over the transmitter. "Mayday, mayday. Ruthless Ruth hit over Bougainville. One engine out, returning south. Coordinates." His voice cracked as static drowned the signal. "No response," he muttered. "We're alone out here." The crew moved with the grim calm of men who had seen too much sky. Yates stayed glued to the tail guns, scanning for more Zeros. Nolan reloaded the nose guns out of habit, though his hands shook. "Think they'll come back?" he asked quietly. "They always come back," Kramer said from the top turret. "They don't quit easy." As if summoned by the words, a speck appeared on the horizon, then another. Sutter leaned forward. "Contact. 2 o'clock high." Miller's stomach tightened. "Falcons?" "No," Sutter whispered. "Too small. Too fast. 2 more zeros. Not Tanaka's squadron." This was a fresh patrol returning from the coast. They spotted the smoking bomber instantly and peeled off in a dive. "Here we go again," Miller muttered, gripping the yoke. "Crew, prepare for engagement." The first zero came in high, the second low, executing a classic scissors attack. The Japanese pilots had done this 100 times before, forced the bomber to split its guns, then strike the blind spot. But Miller's crew had learned from experience. Top turret, track the high one. Tail, take the low. Tracer fire filled the air. The roar of the engines and the clatter of guns merged into one deafening symphony. The top turret caught the higher zero with a lucky burst. Bullets hammered its fuselage, shearing off a flap. The fighter wobbled, but the pilot recovered, determined to finish the kill. The second zero came in from below, riddling the belly of Ruthless Ruth. Holes tore through the metal floor, light streaming through like shattered glass. One round punched through Nolan's gun mount, missing him by inches. "I can't hold this much longer," he yelled. Miller forced the B-25 into a shallow dive. "Hold on!" The ocean rushed up toward them as he skimmed the waves at treetop height. The turbulence made aiming nearly impossible, but it threw off the zeros too. Their 20mm cannons sprayed wildly, kicking up fountains of seawater. "Altitude 600 feet, Sutter shouted. "You're gonna clip the waves." "Better than being Swiss cheese," Miller barked back. He kept the bomber hugging the surface, using the glare of the ocean to blind the pursuers. Then came a sound like tearing canvas. The left wing shuddered violently. "We've got structural damage," Kramer yelled. "She won't take much more." "Just keep shooting," Miller roared. "If we go down, we take one with us." Yates found his target. The low zero swooped in behind them again, barely 50 yards out. He aimed dead center, his sight filled with the crimson sun on the enemy's nose. He squeezed the triggers, letting loose a full burst. The tracers carved into the Zero's cockpit. Glass shattered, smoke poured out. The Japanese plane rolled violently, then slammed into the ocean, exploding in a white plume. "One down!" Yates shouted. The crew cheered weakly, but there was no time to celebrate. The second Zero was still there, diving from above. Its guns flashed, raking the bomber's spine. The top turret went silent. Kramer slumped forward, blood streaking down his arm. "Joe's hit!" Nolan yelled. Miller's heart sank. Every man lost meant another ghost to carry home. He glanced out the cockpit. Flames still flickered on the wing. The gauges were redlining. The last Zero circled for one final pass, determined to finish the crippled bomber. Miller clenched his jaw. "All right, boys," he said softly. "We've got one trick left." Captain Frank Miller's hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the yoke. The ocean flashed below, the waves close enough to touch. One engine gone, hydraulics half dead, and now the last Zero was circling for the kill. Inside Ruthless Ruth, the air was thick with smoke and fear. The crew knew they couldn't outfly the enemy, so they'd have to outthink him. "Listen up," Miller shouted. "We've only got one chance. He's gonna dive from above. When he does, I'm gonna climb just enough to throw him off. Yates, you wait till he's close, real close. Don't waste a single round." The tail gunner's voice came back, steady and grim. "Copy that, Skipper." "I'll make it count." The Japanese pilot, Lieutenant Haruto Mori, rolled his Zero into position high above the bomber. He had watched the dogfight from afar and seen one of his comrades fall. Now honor demanded vengeance. He pulled the nose up, banking into the sun. The light blinded the Americans below, his perfect cover. Inside the B-25, everything rattled. The gauges flickered. Smoke curled from the wounded engine. The men were running on fumes, adrenaline, and raw defiance. "He's coming," Sutter said, his voice trembling. "Right out of the sun." "I see him," Miller replied quietly. "Hold steady." The Zero dived, guns blazing. Fire streaked across the sky, shells ripping through the B-25's left wing. The bomber jolted, metal shrieking in protest. "Now, Frank! Now!" Sutter yelled. Miller slammed the throttle and yanked the stick back. The B-25 lifted just enough, one desperate lurch that broke the Zero's firing angle. "Tail, take the shot!" Yates didn't hesitate. His tracers met the oncoming fighter in midair, a blinding storm of light. The Zero's nose erupted in sparks, its propeller shearing away. But Maury didn't pull up. Whether by bravery or pride, he held his dive straight into the hail of bullets. The two planes passed within 50 feet, so close that Miller saw the glint of Maury's goggles before the Zero exploded. A flash of orange and black filled the sky as flaming debris rained into the sea. The shock wave buffeted the B-25, nearly flipping it. For a moment, everything went white. When the smoke cleared, Ruthless Ruth was still flying. Barely. The left wing was scorched, riddled with holes. The right engine was gone, but she was alive. Silence filled the cabin. No one spoke. Then Yates broke it, voice hoarse over the intercom. "He's down. He's gone." Miller's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Yeah," he said quietly, "but we're not home yet." The long flight south tested every ounce of willpower the crew had left. Briggs, pale and weak, kept sending distress calls despite fading strength. Nolan sat in the nose, scanning the endless ocean. Hours passed. The gauges sank lower. The bomber shuddered like it was ready to give up. Then through the haze, a familiar voice crackled through the radio. "This is Falcon 2. We've got you, Ruthless Ruth. Hold your heading. We're guiding you home." Cheers filled the cabin. The P-38s appeared out of the clouds like guardian angels, circling protectively as the crippled bomber limped toward the faint outline of Guadalcanal. By the time they touched down, the left tire blew out and the landing gear nearly collapsed. The bomber skidded to a halt in a cloud of dust. Fire crews and medics rushed forward. When the engines finally died, the sudden silence felt deafening. Miller climbed out last, smoke-streaked and trembling. The nose art, Ruthless Ruth, was half scorched away, bullet holes peppering her side like scars. Reporters later called it a miracle she made it back. But the men who were there knew better. It wasn't luck. It was grit, teamwork, and a refusal to die quietly. Days later, when Japanese pilots at Rabaul heard that a B-25 had shot down not one, but two Zeros and survived, they refused to believe it. "Impossible," they said. "The Mitchell has weak guns." But word spread fast, and soon the name Ruthless Ruth became legend among Allied crews, a flying fortress in spirit if not in design. Captain Frank Miller was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. His crew received citations for bravery under fire, and somewhere above the endless blue of the Pacific, the ghost of a B-25 still flew, proof that courage could make even a weak bomber unstoppable. The sky never forgot her name.